Greetings, welcome to the Metal Book Tower, and today's video is going to be about J.R. Tolkien, or to be exact, my collection of his books. I try to collect as much of Tolkien books as possible, because I think he's an amazing writer, and there's something unique about his books and the atmosphere and the feelings and so on. So I have his books in both Russian and English, and first I'm going to go through books in Russian and then in English. I can tell you that there are more books in English because I try to read him in English a lot. And most of these books in English I bought after 2020, at the start of this decade. I'm going to start with the smallest book in my collection, and this is Smith of Wootton Major. So this book is actually a collection of short stories, and there's even one poem. In this short collection there are poems and fairy tales that led to Lord of the Rings. There are other writings, ironic and endlessly philosophical. This is what it says on the back of this edition. So in this book we have Smith of Wootton Major, Farmer Giles of Ham, The Adventures of Tom Bombadil, Live by Nigel, and ironically on fairy stories. Here's the thing, I quit the book before I reached on fairy stories, and then years later when I found out about this essay, I wanted to read this, and therefore I bought the English version. And then I realized that I have had this essay all along in this book. I just didn't pay much attention to it. So I read this book in 2014, but I didn't pay too much attention, and now I want to read this book. I'd love to do so, because there are things I would perceive differently now while reading this. And of course I'd love to own the English versions of as well, because I love reading about Tolkien's original language. This is a very small edition, you can carry it in your pocket. I like it. Moving on. Okay, so the next we have the book that started it all, not only for me, but for the world in general, The Hobbit. This edition, for some reason, has film characters on the cover that have nothing to do with the story. So I remember I found this book at home back in 2008, and I was happy very much, because 2008 was the year when I showed a huge interest in Tolkien's works. I watched the Peter Jackson films, I wanted to know more, and I found The Hobbit and I couldn't be happier. I read it multiple times, and I actually want to read this book again in English. The last time I read it was 2020, and I noticed a few details I didn't notice back in 2008. One of the greatest things about The Hobbit is that you can read this book separately. Not only this is a great adventure, very interesting, thrilling, exciting, pretty emotional, you care for the characters and so on, but this is also can be read as a standalone book. And if you want a light-hearted adventure, this book is definitely for you. I recommend this. My favorite chapter of this book is the 5th one, Riddles in the Dark. If you read the book, you know that what the chapter is about. Now, next come the Lord of the Rings books in different translations. So here's the thing, there are multiple Russian translations of Lord of the Rings. So this is one translation, it's quite a hard one. I couldn't read the book at first attempt. I tried reading the book multiple times before I read it. I can say that the first book in general is kind of hard to read due to all the descriptions, to all the details and all the nature and so on, but the translation I think made it even harder. These two, on the other hand, which have the film posters on the cover, they have different translation and they are much easier to read, although I don't like the fact that Pippin is a pin for some reason. And Sackville Bagginses are Halfpenny Bagginses in this one, and Baggins is Babbins. Yeah, some things were definitely not translated well, in my opinion. Some of these made no sense at all. These books are actually physically very light. Sure, they seem to be quite big, but they're actually very light to hold in hands. And the last book in Russian is The Silmarillion. Yeah, The Silmarillion. This is definitely the suffering for all Tolkien fans. The kind of suffering that we love. Yeah, I read this book 2 times and both times I suffered, although the second time it was kind of easier. And I do want to reread this book again, this time in English. Yeah, I definitely need the English version of this book. But you know what? I suffered even in Russian. I can't imagine how I'm going to suffer while reading this in English. I can say that this book made me want to scream, especially at the second half. For some reason. Yeah, I know I shouldn't be saying this, but I can't help it. This book is full of suffering. Both for the characters and for the readers. Okay, let's move on to books in English. No, I would like to start with Lord of the Rings. I wanted to reread this series in English back in autumn 2021, and I chanced to get all 3 books. I thought I would spend autumn and winter 2021 and maximum spring 2022 reading these books. Spoiler alert, I am reading the books to this day. Okay, this one, Fellowship of the Ring, it took 1.5 months to read. But this one, the smallest book of the 3, I took nearly 1 year of reading. I read it very slowly. Currently, I'm reading Return of the King, and I can say that out of all 3, this is the easiest to read. I definitely hope it takes less time than The Two Towers. Also, I want to talk about these editions by HarperCollins. The deal is that HarperCollins treats these books as if they are one huge volume. Allow me to explain this. In Fellowship of the Ring, you have chapters 1, 2, 3, and so on. But Two Towers doesn't start with 1, 2, 3. It starts with 413. Yes, HarperCollins treats these books as if they're one huge volume and not 3 separate novels. And it can be kind of confusing. Also, I want to point out how small The Two Towers is in English compared to the Russian version. So, here's the English version and here is the Russian version. Oh, look at these. So the Russian version is obviously bigger. Yes. But on the other hand, these books, these editions, they have a very, very small font. It's kind of hard to get through here. You can see how small it is. And these books, on the other hand, they have quite big font. At least compared to the HarperCollins editions. Yeah, it's very surprising how this is one book, and the Russian translation is bigger than the English one. Yeah, I'm currently reading Return of the King, and I hope I manage to get through it much faster than Two Towers. And so far I like it very much. This is actually my favorite Lord of the Rings book, because you have actually very interesting action, and dialogue and dynamics, and there's less nature, as I remember. Next comes Unfinished Tales of Numenor and Middle-earth. Oh, I've had this book since December 2019 and I still haven't read it, even though I read other Tolkien books in English. This is actually the first book in English that I got. So while reading Return of the King, I did think of this book, and now I'm considering taking this year. What do we have here? Of Tuor and His Coming to Gondolin. You have part 1, the first age. Of Tuor and His Coming to Gondolin. A lot about Túrin, actually. Nargothrond, Glowring, the death, and so on. This is basically the Children of Húrin, a different version, I guess. And then you have part 2, the second age, the description of the island of Numenor, the line of Elros, the kings of Numenor, the history of Galadriel and Celeborn, and then you have the third age, the disaster of the Gladden Fields, Cirion and Eorl, and the friendship of Gondorn and Rohan, the quest of Erebor, the hunt for the ring, the battles of Forts of Isen, and there's on the back you have Gollum's capture by Aragorn and Sauron's hunt for the ring. To be honest, this is why I got myself this book, because I remembered this amazing fan film called The Hunt for Gollum. If you still haven't seen it, I recommend checking it out. It's only 40 minutes long. It's a very good film. It's a very beautiful one too. And this one has a very small font too, but I definitely want to go through this one. Next we have 3 separate stories from the Silmarillion. Beren and Luthien, Children of Húrin, The Fall of Gondolin. I got myself Beren and Luthien in 2020, this one, Children of Húrin, in 2021, and The Fall of Gondolin in 2022. Even though Beren and Luthien is my favorite of all 3, I was impressed a lot by Children of Húrin. I have to say this is the darkest thing Tolkien has ever written. To be honest, these 2 books are quite opposites of each other. This is a light-hearted, a more uplifting story, even though there's a sadness in it. This one, on the other hand, is very doomy, it's very dark, it's a little bit depressing. Like I said, the darkest thing Tolkien has ever written. When I read the Silmarillion version for the second time, I thought this is darker than A Song of Ice and Fire. Very dark. Although it can be argued how much happened because of Morgoth's curse and how much happened because of Túrin's actions. But The Fall of Gondolin, unlike the first 2, I liked a little less, because this is a retelling of The Fall of Gondolin multiple times. There are different versions of The Fall of Gondolin, and it did not impress me as much as these 2 books did. Yes, these 2 books were much stronger. Now next comes the book that has nothing to do with Middle-earth, and it is The Fall of Arthur. I'm considering reading this book this year because it's quite small, and this is predominantly a poem about the fall of Arthur, like it says on the cover. This is sort of Tolkien's interpretation of Arthurian legends, and I really want to go through this one. This one also has a commentary from Christopher Tolkien. This is a poem mixed with prose, and I think this isn't going to take long. This is not going to take a lot of time from me. I am going to read this fast, I think. At least I hope so. Now the next 2 books are non-fiction from Tolkien. So, of course, you have On Fairy Stories. Oh, the irony, I didn't know that I had On Fairy Stories in Russian, but that's okay, because I like having Tolkien in English. I like this edition, I like it. So in this is an essay on why escapism matters, why fantasy matters, what were the roots of fairy stories, who is the primary audience. The essay itself isn't very big, it's quite short, it's kind of probably this, and the rest of the book is basically a commentary. The essay is being analyzed and explained. At first I didn't pay much attention to the explanation, but now I want to. And finally, the last book. This is my recent purchase, and this is Letters from J.R. Tolkien. This is also the only book in English, the only one, which isn't by HarperCollins. This is by Houghton Mill Publishing House. I wonder why. I just got used to HarperCollins, but anyway. Well, in this book you have J.R. Tolkien's personal letters to his loved ones, and also his letters about his books to his agent and other people. This is a soft touch edition. It's floppy. It opens quite well, but I don't like the font. It's even worse than in Lord of the Rings from HarperCollins edition. But this is something I definitely would love to read, because it would show a different side to Tolkien. And last but not least, but it's rather a bonus, not a book, but something else. I don't know if this actually counts as a Tolkien Collection, but I want to show this anyway. This is Imaginations from the Other Side album by Blind Guardian. I'm showing this because, it references Tolkien's works, particularly in the first song, Imaginations from the Other Side. There's this line, or Frodo bore the ring. I think that's how it was. I don't remember. But Frodo was definitely mentioned in that song. I only have Imaginations from the Other Side, and That's all. I hope to own more albums from them because they are so good. Anyway, that's all. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. What do you have in your Tolkien collection? Let me know down in the comments, be it books or something else. See you next time. Goodbye.